Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. To anyone new to this channel is dedicated to helping people learn the difference between authentic non-duality and nonsense non-duality, often called Neo-Advaita. My name is Arthur. I was caught in Neo-Advaita for almost 20 years, and through grace and grit and grace, I made it out, and now it's my honor to help other people find their way out. So I was scrolling around Quora, which is an interesting question and answer website. People ask questions and other people offer answers. And someone asked a very interesting question, not connected to Neo-Advaita. Their question was, in your opinion, do you have a right to have an opinion on a religion? In your opinion, to have an opinion on a religion, is it necessary to be a practitioner of it? And so I started writing about, from my point of view, that there's three approaches to any religion or philosophy. There's the critic, the person who thinks it's wrong and is seeking to disprove it. There's the believer, the person who believes in it, is passionate about it, is trying to prove it's right, and the neutral observer, the person who is trying to understand what the teaching is, and then potentially and then express that neutral understanding. So I'm going to take a little bit of a loop, but I'm going to come around to Neo-Advaita. So please hang with me for a minute or two, because this is what helped me to recover from Neo-Advaita, and I think it can be helpful to other people. So in college, I majored in religion, not in what most people normally think of the word religion. My degree was in the academic study of religion, and primarily what I was taught in was how to be a neutral observer of a religion. I focused on Hinduism quite a bit, and one of my mentors was Hindu. In fact, that's where I was introduced to Advaita Vedanta. And what he taught us was not is Hindu or Indian or Vedic philosophy, not is it true or not, but what do Hindus believe? As again, without believing or denying, how do Hindus act? How do Hindus believe? How do they view the world? What does it mean to look at the world through Hindu eyes? He really taught us how to be neutral observers. And I'm not talking in any mystical sense of the word. Instead of, in religion so often is it true or not? Which religion is true or not? The way we were taught is what is true for a member of a particular religion. So I hope that nuance is clear. So I was taught to understand not the nature of reality, but how different religious traditions viewed the nature of reality. Now, after a short time, this was unsatisfying to me because I just didn't want to understand how Hindus or Buddhists viewed the world. Those were the two I was most focused on. Also Taoists. But I wanted to know the Tao. I wanted to experience nirvana. I wanted to experience oneness. I just didn't want to know how they viewed it. And so there was kind of this tension within me. On the one hand, I was a mystic. I was seeking to directly experience these things. On the other hand, I was taught to try to actually understand the philosophy, and to really be devoted to having a precise understanding of the philosophy. And that training saved my life. And that training is part of what helped me pull me out of Neo-Advaita. Because Neo-Advaita and for anyone who's new to this channel, Neo-Advaita is just a distorted presentation of Advaita Vedanta. Neo-Advaita is a religion. It's absolutely a religion. It teaches people to believe without critical thought. And not only does it teach people to believe without critical thought, it teaches, its teaching of Neo-Advaita is in direct contradiction to what the actual non-dual texts and actual non-dual teachers teach. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You cannot follow the philosophy of Ramana Maharshi and Neo-Advaita. They're in direct contradiction to each other in so many ways, which I've talked about so many times. But so there I was, I had all this training, and I started to have mystical experiences. And then I had a profound mystical experience in a Neo-Advaita cult. I was in a straight up Neo-Advaita cult, is how I was introduced to, quote, non-duality. Again, the Neo-Advaita version of non-duality. And then I was able to make it out of that cult, and I made it into a second cult, which wasn't as bad, but was very much focused on studying the philosophy of Ramana Maharshi. But they were teaching such a distorted version of it. But again, I would go to this place and I would have these, as soon as you walked in the door at this temple, your mind would be quiet. This wasn't just me. This was everybody who went there. It was profound. This teacher was able to emanate this profound energy. And so all of us who went there were like, this has got to be true because of the experience we had there. And so we'd shut down the critical part of our minds. And sometimes we would ask this teacher questions, and he would just do the typical Neo-Advaita tricks of, who is it who wants to know? Or, once you attain the self, all your questions will be answered. You know, sometimes myself and others would challenge him, and that's how he would respond. And we were all getting like high as a kite off the energy. So we usually just let it go. But I just had this nagging suspicion. And I think most of the people there as well have nagging suspicions. But anyway, so at a certain point, I started to notice that not only was he not answering the questions, not only was he giving kind of bullshit answer to some of these questions, but what he was teaching was in direct contradiction to the Bhagavad Gita. And then I discovered that what he was teaching was in direct contradiction to Ramana Maharshi. And so there's kind of became this tug of war within me. On the one hand, I wanted what he was saying to be true because I felt so much bliss when I believed it. And I felt so much bliss when I went there. So I was heavily invested in believing what this person was saying was true. On the other hand, I couldn't discount what I was starting to notice. Big contradictions between the teachings of Ramana Maharshi and between the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, upon which Advaita Vedanta is. And so there was this war between the scholar who wants to understand the philosophy, and scholars need to be critical in the sense of they need precision. Philosophy is based on attending to details and making connections and seeing how everything fits together, or noticing when it doesn't fit together. I see your comment, and hey, Marian, I'll get to it in a moment. But there was also this mystic who was loving the experience, who like didn't want to think about that and didn't want to pay attention to the discrepancies and didn't want to pay attention to the nagging feeling inside of me that something was very wrong here, because I felt so good. It temporarily felt so good. But what I began to notice is that when I practiced self-inquiry and when I really took the philosophy I was being taught at this Neo-Advaita thing, that I would feel great in the short term, but yucky in the medium to long term. it would literally destabilize my personality. And I would actually start to feel suicidal. At a certain point, every time I started to practice self-inquiry seriously, and to practice self-inquiry seriously, you have to do it every moment of the day. That's what Ramana Maharshi taught. Neo-Advaita teachers will not tell you that. But that's what self-inquiry is a moment-by-moment practice. That's why prerequisites are necessary. That's why most people are not prepared for it. That's why it takes stringent preparation. And I didn't know that at the time. So, but I kept going back because I felt so good when I did it. And I felt so good in satsang. I hesitate to call it even satsang. Satsang means association with the truth. It should be, I don't know the Sanskrit word for bullshit, but it was more like a bullshit song, association with bullshit, or half-truth. We'll call it ardha sung, which means association with half-truth. That also means association with half ardha atsang, association with half untruth. So I was hooked because it felt so good. And because whenever I'd practice self-inquiry or believe in non-dual philosophy, then I didn't take care of my life, and I didn't really, it was kind of like, it was an escape. But it was also an escape that would work in the short term, but in the medium term, I would collapse and fall apart and get suicidal. And so it was a very vicious cycle. And over time, I associated, I would go to this place less and less, but I would still go. And I still kept going back and trying to make it work, which is how addiction works, right? Like in addiction, you realize the behavior isn't working, but you still try and find a way to make it work, even though it's like destroying your life and tearing you apart. I still kept trying to make it work. And it was only when a very famous Neo-Advaita teacher, there was an expose about them, that something within me snapped. I was starting to really get ready. The timing, it was actually very beautiful. Something within me was starting to let go and to get critical of Neo-Advaita. And then an expose came out of probably the most famous Neo-Advaita teacher on the planet. And then something within me snapped. And I really began the process of seeing that Neo-Advaita was not true and harmful. And I've shared on here many times that it's one thing to realize that Neo-Advaita is untrue, but then there's the process of unwinding oneself, which has taken many years. And over the last couple of years, every now and then I would feel the temptation to go back to it. And about 3 months ago, I felt a sense of completion, that there's no way I can go back to Neo-Advaita. And I also studied with a traditional Advaita teacher, an actual Advaita teacher. And I've realized that Advaita Vedanta just isn't for me. I respect traditional Advaita as a valid spiritual path, but it's just not my path. And so now I'm in the process of cleaning, of healing, you could say, from the negative impact. So I'm going to say a little bit more, but I want to say if anyone has any questions or comments, please do type them in. And so the way that I found my way out of Neo-Advaita was to recognize that Neo-Advaita is different from Advaita Vedanta. That Neo-Advaita, all the jokers, I shouldn't say jokers, but I guess I still have a little bit of resentment. All the Neo-Advaita teachers you find on YouTube, anyone on YouTube teaching non-duality who isn't wearing a robe or doesn't have well, I don't even want to say that because some of the Neo-Advaita teachers wear robes, who aren't part of a traditional lineage, or don't have a teacher who is part of a traditional lineage, they're probably teaching Neo-Advaita. And but the most important thing to get, the thing that broke me free, and I pray that it can break other people free, is the recognition that what all these jokers on YouTube are teaching is different from what Ramana Maharshi actually taught and what Advaita Vedanta teachers have been teaching for it's been over 1,200 years that Advaita Vedanta was, I won't say discovered, but sort of turned into a system of transformation. So that's what broke me out. That's part of why I'm so passionate about it. And part of why I'm so passionate about the topic is I've realized that Neo-Advaita is addictive. Like any cult is addictive in a certain sense of the word. And Neo-Advaita, you don't even have to be a part of an actual physical group to have the cult gets established in your mind in Neo-Advaita. And it took me a long time to work my way out of it. Oh, thank you, Marion. I wish you a blessed Christmas as well, and happy holy days to everyone here of all beliefs and no beliefs. Okay, any questions or comments? Great question. So Marion wrote, considering you studied Buddhism academically, what prevented you from following that path? Just curious if I think it's very stabilizing for most people. Well, so I don't want to get too off topic here, but it's a great question. So I personally believe that, I have a very strong opinion, but I'm just seeing if this is the time and place. Well, okay, so I'm going to say it. The way, in my view, the way most Buddhism is taught today is contrary to how what the Buddha actually taught. And here's what I mean by that. Most people today, they're taught Buddhism. I was taught Buddhism by hopping right into Vipassana meditation. And I believe this is contrary to what the Buddha taught, harmful, and in some ways it's very similar to Neo-Advaita. In certain ways, it's very different, but it has some similarity. It's written that the Buddha said that right view is that the Buddha taught that there are 8 steps to nirvana or freedom. And that right view, the first step, is the foundation of all the other steps. But right view isn't really emphasized so much. And what's really emphasized in a lot of Buddhist schools today is just practicing Vipassana. But without right view and without the second step, right intention, it's kind of like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, without preparatory practices and a deep understanding, and then going and doing a 10-day Vipassana retreat or even an hour of Vipassana. It can really mess with your mind, especially if you have intense trauma, which I do, especially if you have other what are called mental illnesses. I don't know but some extreme mental imbalances, which I did at the time I was struggling with very deep depression. If you have those things and you're not properly prepared and you're not properly interviewed first and you're just thrown in to Vipassana, it can really unbalance you, which I was. And so this isn't to criticize the teachings of the Buddha, but it is to criticize how Buddhism is taught today in many places, not in all places. And I would say it's very similar to how Neo-Advaita is taught. If you are not prepared for self-inquiry will mess with you. If you have extreme suffering, extreme mental imbalances, or extreme unresolved suffering, self-inquiry, if you take it seriously, it will wreck you. I wouldn't know. It took me to the depths of despair and almost to the point of suicide. And I am not alone in this. I was just reading the other day, what it causes something called derealization. We're all seeking self-realization, right? Like an end of suffering. And self-inquiry without proper preparation and without proper guidance leads to derealization, to this dissociative, psychotic state. I experienced it. I didn't experience it as bad as many other people have. I get emails from people who, like, they went off the deep end. Self-inquiry is not, Neo-Advaita teachers give out self-inquiry like they're giving out air or water. Anyone can drink water. Anyone can breathe air. Anyone cannot safely practice self-inquiry. And I would say the same is true of Vipassana. I don't want to get too far off subject, but it really highlights spiritual practices are like prescription medications. You got to take the right one at the right time for the right condition, or it will fuck you up. That's why a good teacher is needed. Wow. Marion wrote, Americans must be very different to UK. I know Zen monks and nuns don't meditate more than 40 minutes at a time, even during session. That's their, that's the formal. And so my first introduction to Buddhist meditation is I went in and they just said, okay, just sit here and watch your breath. They didn't ask me any questions, nothing, for an hour. And that wasn't a Zen practice. So, and I'm not trying to, I have profound respect for the Buddha and Buddha Dharma. I just have some concerns about how it's currently being presented. Any other questions or comments? Well, I'm very honored, as always. We've got to have an audience that what I'm doing. See, I think the other reason I do what I do is this is such a niche, right? It's such a it's such a specialized topic. Most people on planet Earth today don't know what non-duality is. They don't know what I don't even like using the word non-duality anymore. They don't know what Advaita Vedanta is, actual non-duality. Most people on the planet don't know about it, right? And then most people who do know about something about it, they don't know Advaita Vedanta. They know Neo-Advaita, and they call it non-duality. It really is not. And so of most of the people who've even heard of anything non-dual-esque, they're caught in Neo-Advaita. They're caught in fake non-duality. And but there is this growing awareness, and it makes me so happy that it's happening. It makes me so happy that I get to be a part of it. There's this growing awareness that Neo-Advaita is just bullshit and harmful. And but it's such a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because Neo-Advaita almost destroyed my life. Neo-Advaita destroyed the life of someone who's very dear to me, very, very dear to me. And so it's a very personal topic for me, but it's also a very, what's What's the word I'm looking for? See, Neo-Advaita says, in essence, nothing matters, right? I mean, that's Neo-Advaita's bottom line. Nothing matters. They very rarely will say it, but it's just not true. Lots of things do matter. And it matters to connect with other people who have a similar experience, to be around people you're comfortable with, and be around people that that you have a shared experience with. That matters. Is that going to lead to enlightenment? No. Is that like supreme truth? No, but it's important and it matters. There are things in life that do matter. And it's very meaningful to be around people who can understand these things. And it's very meaningful to get to associate and hang out a little bit. And it's also very meaningful to be able to help. And I think maybe that's where Neo-Advaita misses the mark the most, is the complete discounting of the fact that many things in this world truly matter and are truly important. They miss that on a heart level, but it's also missed on a pragmatic level, because that's part of traditional Advaita Vedanta, dharma. Doing that which is harmonious, doing your duty, participation. So in traditional Advaita Vedanta, there's this holding of a seeming paradox. It's not actually a paradox. According to one of my teachers, it's not actually a paradox, but it seems like the paradox that everything is one, yet simultaneously, here are these individual beings and units, and we need to learn to relate to everything as if it's one. That's what Neo-Advaita doesn't teach. So if everything is one, and if I embody that, I don't, but let's pretend for a moment that I'm teaching non-duality, okay? Let's say I'm a non-dual guru. So if I have realized, and I haven't, and I'm not a non-dual guru, I've had tastes of it, of non-dual knowing. If I am at one with everything, I should be able to relate to everything as part of myself. As it's written, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. If I have realized oneness, I should be able to navigate through life in a harmonious manner, mostly contributing, because I'm full from knowing my oneness. Neo-Advaita teachers live the exact opposite of this. Unharmonious relationships, sex scandals, money scandals, power scandals. Their lives are not dedicated to service. They get up on a stage, collect money, and then go run away and live a private life. It's the exact opposite of actual Advaita Vedanta. That's why I've said Neo-Advaita is a religion. It's about talking about it, not living it. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. They don't take responsibility for students. And that's where I'll go back to where I started from. It's like Neo-Advaita teachers will throw out their teachings like candy, but then they won't guide their students on how to skillfully eat it. And then their students get sick. And occasionally their students kill themselves. I watched a video recently of a Neo-Advaita teacher. Someone confronted them about the fact that one of their students killed themselves. And then what did the Neo-Advaita teacher do? They got defensive. This Neo-Advaita teacher gave the teaching, let go of everything. So one of their students heard that and went off on their own and basically went crazy trying to let go of everything. And when someone publicly confronted this Neo-Advaita teacher, the Neo-Advaita teacher said, well, what does it mean to let go of everything? And da-da-da, and da-da-da. All these justifications. Not an ounce of grief, not an ounce of regret. It's a fucking circus. But sadly, it's a circus in which now people, thank God, not in large numbers, but people are dying and people's lives are being wrecked. Because as Marion said so well, the teachers don't take responsibility and they don't guide students one-on-one, and they just provide a formula and they try and squeeze everybody into that formula. Once again, which is what a religion is. I'm losing my voice, so I guess it's time for me to stop here. Thank you so much, everybody. And I wish everyone a blessed Neo-Advaita free day. Take care.